Nominating Committee meeting, 8th Mental Health Recovery Service Board is hereby called to order. And we'll have our roll call.
Good evening. Reverend Gordon. Mr. Arnold.
Here.
Ms. Banks. Ms. Bell.
Present.
Mr. Brown. Ms. Clark. Here. Ms. Friedman. Ms. Harding. Here. Ms. Rodriguez. Mr. White. Here.
Recognition of our visitors, starting with Richard. Thank you, everyone, and we'll have our minutes from the Executive Nominating Committee minutes all the way back to January the 14th, 2025.
I'll motion. Second.
Any questions? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Those abstaining? And the motion passes. All right, I think Scott has the remainder of.
Yep, I do have the remainder of the agenda. So let's start with agenda item number 5. This is for information only. Mental Health Recovery Services Board Trustee Membership Update. I provided a brief update to our last conversation at the top of page 3 of your board packet. Just as a reminder, we have an authorized strength of 18. We currently have 16 members. The 2 vacancies are Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services appointees. At least one of those vacancies must be filled by a person who receives mental health treatment services, and the other is an individual or with a family member that receives mental health services. Additionally, at the end of June, we have 4 trustee appointments that are terming out. 2 of those appointees are eligible for reappointment. Ms. Howe and Ms. Carter's first terms end on the 30th of June, 2025. Both of those individuals are eligible to serve another 4-year term and have indicated a willingness to be reappointed. They will be making application for reappointment. Also, Dr. Sadah's partial term expires on that same day. While he's eligible to serve 2 more terms, he's identified that he has a change in his personal circumstances and at this point did not want to commit to a reappointment. So we left it with him as if things change, let us know, and then we'll evaluate what opportunities might be available to participate at a later date. So then we have Ms. Senna, whose 2nd term expires on June 30th of 2025. She's not eligible for county commissioner reappointment, but is eligible for a state appointment and has indicated a willingness to apply and serve another term if reappointed by, or if appointed by the state. So you may have seen in yesterday's Blade, the county did put a public notice in the Blade with ours included, with a link to where you go to make application for your to make application and to learn more about the board. It would be wise that we identify individuals that we would encourage to make application, so that we make sure that our needs are being met here at the board level. Essentially thinking about succession planning of trustees. Now, logically, the next question becomes, well, who are those individuals that we would be interested in, right? Of course, I would encourage anyone with lived experience in recovery to make application either on substance use from substances or mental health. Individual and family members and clinicians, I think, specifically around clinician that provide services to mental health would be advisable as well. As we think about other items, other skill sets for potential trustees, we, should be thinking also about what about next year? So, not just the 4 that are going off now, but what about in 26 when we have quite a few folks dropping off? We could probably use someone who has relationship with any of our organized labor, education, maybe someone who represents a different age demographic. So someone on let me be delicate in this phrasing. Someone,
Younger.
younger. There we go. Yeah.
Millennial.
Thank you for bailing me out. Also, someone who has, experiences in other systems, maybe developmental disability or child protection services. Those are all, I think, appropriate and beneficial recruitment strategies for our trustees. Always remember also balance we need to attain for trustees as it relates to gender and race. That is in Ohio Revised Code. So we're always thinking about what our makeup looks like from that perspective. And ultimately, as you are aware, it is at the discretion of appointments are at the discretion of the appointing authorities, and it is a luxury that we get to make recommendations to those folks. So we deeply appreciate that. And so that's why I think, just thinking from your perspective about who you think should be involved in this board and doing some active recruitment to complete applications makes some sense for us so that we assure that our succession planning from trustees is maintained. So I'll be happy to ask or answer any questions that I can. Yes, sir.
Lived experience. Currently undergoing treatment, is there a time span that they have had to complete a treatment or something that?
I think that's really, that's obviously a delicate balance, right? And it differs regarding the population, right? Individuals on the substance use disorder side who is actively in treatment and not having much sobriety might not be the best fit. We really look at, people in recovery. And so that's where I would encourage, and I'd hate to put a timeline on it or anything because, that probably would just come back to nip us a little bit. But we're looking for some stability and recovery.
You need a benchmark.
Right. You want a benchmark? Is that what you asked?
No, I'm just saying, you need a benchmark for a lot of things at some point.
Traditionally, I someone who's been in the system a long time, traditionally, I think a solid year of recovery is advisable.
Okay.
And, you know, that's negotiable on either side of that, considering, you know, have you had long-term sobriety before and then, or long-term recovery before and then something happened, or, you know, there's a lot of nuances to that conversation. I think the biggest part of that though is how comfortable will they be interacting in this environment, and how can they contribute their life's, you know, story to better decision making here? That to me is, I think, the highest value.
Okay, so that's the recovery side. What about the services side?
You mean clinicians, things like that?
No, when I say it, you say recovery, substance abuse, but suppose there are ongoing mental health, behavioral health care services.
Oh, I don't think we have a time frame for that. I mean, active is fine. It's really about the stability of the individual and the individual's ability to interact and contribute successfully. That's what I would say.
I'm just trying to.
Yeah, I understand. I know
Get a mindset.
you're going through your checklist now,
Yeah.
right? And then, you know, having somebody on the younger side that is, you know, they've gone through life experiences that we've not had. Just, you know, I think that there's some value in those diversifications as well. Yes, sir.
Do you know who's going off next year? You
I do. I just don't happen to have that right here. I can.
Could you let us
I
know?
believe you are. I believe Pastor Gordon is. I think we have maybe 6 going off.
Yeah, it's a big number.
Yeah, it's a pretty big number. And then there's a couple that are, I think Katina, I think you might be as well.
Sounds right.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can send that out. And, you know,
And indicate if they've accepted if they were eligible to run another term.
yeah, I'm pretty sure that there's a big number that aren't eligible to.
Okay.
My
To
last
be
one was
reappointed.
state, I believe.
Yeah.
My last one was state.
So you're always eligible to be reappointed from a different
Oh, okay.
appointing authority. It's just, will that appointing authority have a space, right?
Gotcha, yep.
Which is why we're, at the last Ohio Revised Code changes, the last biennium budget, they actually made both the county and the state responsible to fill the designated positions. It was no law, it used to be just the state.
Got
Now it's both, so we have an equal balance.
Right. And it's
have a little
it
bit
gives us a
more-
little flexibility.
Yeah, a little more flexibility, right? Any other questions?
know, you talk about someone with lived experiences and not necessarily serving on the board. I'm not talking about that. But I just feel like, and I don't know where this could plug in, I could just feel like my son could bring so much insight. But is there any way for them to plug into our work without being on the board?
So we have forums, you know that. We admittedly have not done a very strong job of reinstituting our recovery council. And that would have been the way for all that to occur. And that went by the wayside in COVID, and we've just not been able to return to it. That would be the structure.
Because sometimes when you talk about lived experiences, so many folks out there who may not want to serve at this capacity, but they could provide us so much insight that we just don't have.
You know, an idea would be, and I gave this to, it's so funny, it must be the theme of the week. I have themes that seem to pop up every week. And this week's theme has been along those lines. And I've advised all of them to come to our public meeting. Come to the public meeting and talk during the open session. I've just said, you know, if there's information you have, you believe we should be aware of, or you have something to say, we have open session and the board listens. I mean, it's not like the board sits there during open session and just, you know,
Yeah.
glasses, their eyes glass over. I go, we listen. So if you have something you want to express and you want to address the board, that is the time the community has the right to do that. It's you guys are more than welcome to do that. And that might be an interesting place for your son to be involved. But at the same time, when he has ideas and whatnot, he has the platform to share them.
Anything else? Okay, then how about if we move on to the second for information only item? It's the membership trustee board, trustee membership skills inventory and mentorship. That is also on page 3 of your packet and rolls into the top of page 4. And just kind of a background, as a part of my evaluation, I was given some goals of identifying or developing a skills inventory for the trustees, and then also a mentorship program. Evidently that came out of some conversations that occurred. There was also a recommendation that we involve the board more in some advocacy efforts, and hopefully you have noticed that I'm sending more advocacy opportunities out to you. But nonetheless, just kind of give you some updates on this. I'll present a more refined mentorship program discussion at our May Executive and Nominating Committee. I'm not ready to talk too much about that, but we are ready to talk about the trustee skills inventory tracking system. And I do need to give a little shout out here to Ms. Senna Murad Friedman, because she helped us provide a little bit more definition to what we were proposing. We had already started working on a skills inventory, and in fact, I've always maintained a very, I guess it would be rudimentary skills inventory around Ohio Revised Code requirements that I use very often. But we had internally, one of Miss Wendy's first responsibilities was to help develop a skills inventory. So we were able to take that along with what Senna had put together for a different organization and merge those, and then redevelop the tracking tool to have it make sense for the board, this board. And so in this process, we also were thinking about how trustees become engaged in the board, what data is collected at the orientation process, via your applications, via the first time you start to write your demographics out. How do we capture that and reduce duplication? What is required by ORC? And I already mentioned a few of those things. How do we track the designated positions? How do we track the gender and race? And then there's applications that trustees have to fill out that have some demographics on them. And so why recreate the wheel on that and include that in? And then there's a number of different skills that as I thought about the group that sits around the table, but then also thought about some of the skill sets that I mentioned previously, what might we want to identify and then think about as we're having discussions about who else needs to be. So you have a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different categories. General information, things that we talked about, appointment, terms, can you serve another term, who's your training authority, that stuff. Designated positions, do you fill one of those designated positions? Ohio Moss demographics, because they have a rather unique way of collecting their demographics. And beyond our control, I might add. And then where we did the most work was around the talents. And you can see the list there. I'm not going to go through those lists, but we wanted you to see those so that you could have a little bit more thought on, is there something that's missing? Is there something that should be there or shouldn't be there that we're missing? And then the final version is the leadership and committee. Where are you serving? What are your committees? That kind of stuff. Did you serve on an officer? That's all part of our succession discussions. And since we're going through this, we might as well have it all in one place so that I can just pull it up. We already have the the spreadsheet, which was easily adaptable from what Senate had provided, already mirrors what's on here, so it's easy to just go in, plug something out, back in. It's fairly, in my mind, it's a fairly comprehensive list, but there's always room for improvement. So
I think it's great.
yes, ma'am.
The, at the top of page 4, the other period ethnicity, and then the categories listed thereafter, is that part of the Ohio Moss demographics?
Yes, that other is part of the race category, and then the ethnicity is what Ohio Moss tracks.
Think of anything, I'm trying to.
Go ahead, say it. It's why I put Ohio Moss.
Well, I'm just trying to determine Appalachian ethnicity.
That was my question too.
What is that? I'm not saying that.
So it is a long-standing data point for Ohio Moss. They started collecting that data, and it's years ago. This is not new to me. I've seen this. I mean, when I was at Task, this was part of the data collection tool, and it really represents those that are what you would traditionally define as from Appalachia. There is a geographic definition. Don't ask me to report that to you right now. But it's like a certain roots from that area, or are you Southern Ohio, but it doesn't necessarily have to be just limited to Ohio, right? And yeah, so we don't see a lot of that here.
Sort of like a Midwesterner.
Okay.
But yeah, it doesn't.
Appalachian has nothing to do with race, I mean.
It does.
Or ethnicity.
Or ethnicity, right.
They identify it as it's why I actually put Ohio Moss demographics. I knew it was immediately going to be flagged as a discussion point.
Well,
And,
because I can say, what about, hey, Gullah, I mean, I'm a Gullah, so.
What does that include?
Any of those that are not these.
Yeah. If you're gonna track all those.
That's
So,
cute.
okay, so barring any other additions or edits, the,
Do, you know what's not on here, is, disability.
so,
Planning and
yeah, I put it in there. Let me just make sure. And let me show you where.
Other systems work experience.
Personal experience.
Yeah. Other systems, personal experience, is that
And there's
other
other
system words,
systems.
other systems, personal experience.
Is that where you would,
That's where I would have put it.
so that's on there. Labor's not on there.
Organized labor. Third one,
Third one.
tenants include attorneys, healthcare, organized
Oh,
labor.
there it is. Okay. Duh.
That's a big list, so I went through it, I had it all out there, and then I went, okay, now this one. Oh, then I forgot criminal justice, and I forgot this, and I forgot that. So,
That would be one robust board.
so, I mean, this doesn't have to be, this can be a living thing, right? We don't have to say set it and forget it.
But yeah, sure, the times could change and other things could become the forefront, you know, and come to the forefront.
So we would envision, you know, we would identify where all these things get collected and then, you know, populate them for the trustees. And then the talents would have, we could probably do a survey monkey or something like that, and be self-identified. And then, you know, we can use that information in some reporting format to help us identify what we want to be involved in the board.
You know, Scott, the easiest place to collect this information would be an orientation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
to say, you know, this list, check off the ones that you feel comfortable
Yeah.
in contributing in.
Yeah, we think that that's probably the logical one. I also have 16 people that can recreate that. So,
I'm wondering if you milled it out, if everybody just checked off boxes and sent it
yeah,
back. I'm just trying to prevent
Yeah.
from having to recreate any kind of wheels.
well, we're also looking, can we just do it in a survey monkey and have it self-populate into a spreadsheet of some kind? You know, so what's the ease of being able to do that?
Yeah.
And then, and remember, it has to flow. So as trustees leave, we have to be able to remove them easily and add new folks in, right? And then have it.
Living, like you said, it's a living document.
Yeah. So, but I think it is a great addition to our planning efforts, and I'm glad it was suggested because it formalizes it more. Like I said before, I had an informal process where I need this. I actually have an old spreadsheet that we use, but we'll work on implementation of that and move forward with it. So, okay. All right. So the last thing on our agenda is review of the governance policies. And as we go through the next several months, and I'll say several, probably going into August, we will be undertaking a review of all of our board policies. Yes, it's that time again. We've been a bit remiss and it's gotten away from us a little bit, but we're gonna get it under control. You may recall that we are a Culture of Quality certified board. Culture of Quality is a auditing system or a surveying system that our state association provides for us that essentially says here are the things in Ohio Revised Code that are required of boards. Here are some standards that match up to those requirements. Show us how you meet those requirements. And then they also lend in some best practices. And if you meet 80% of those standards, then you get a corrective action plan for the other 20%, but you also get a certification that says you're a culture quality board. Of the 50 boards that are in existence in Ohio, 37 of them are culture of quality certified boards. We've been certified, I think, when we go through our next certification, I think it'll be our 4th recertification, 3rd recertification. So first one was certification. So we're going on 12 years, maybe longer. Actually longer, because COVID kind of slowed down the certification process and things like that. So I think we've been certified longer than I've been here. But a part of that is making sure that we have up-to-date policies that we've reviewed in accordance with the promulgation of policies and procedures, which basically says every policy will be reviewed by the board at least once every 3 years. So we review the policies, we update the policies, and then we apply those policies against the surveyor document and find the documentation for those survey requirements. That's kind of the way it works. In the review of the policy, we take the opportunity to update any organizational changes that may have occurred. So, you might have a title change that wasn't captured. You might have a change in Ohio Revised Code reference, which happens a lot more than you would think, because the code changes and then the numbers change. So we always go back and reference the number to make sure we're talking about the right thing. Or you might have a new law that's come in that we might want to evaluate or consider. And so we try and capture that in the evaluation process. And I'm going through this a little bit longer than I normally would, just because you won't see them just here in executive and nominating. You're going to see a whole flood of them coming in planning and oversight as well. And we're going to try and stage them so that we don't overwhelm you. But it's always a good idea to make sure we're up to date. So the plan is that today you're going to view all the governance policies. There are 12 governance policies currently. We're not suggesting any additional governance policies at this time. And we give you a table of the governance policies and then a summary of major changes in the table. We also have in the policies themselves the track changes so that you can see what changes are. So you can see there are changes that that might be superficial to the actual policy, but just make sense. And then there's major changes. And I don't think that, by the way, I don't think there's any real major changes to these 12. But there is a pretty substantial change right on the board member expectations and responsibilities policy. We had the wrong section of code referenced. And we had ORC when it's OAC, and anybody who knows the difference knows that's a pretty big change. So, now clearly we operated under that section, but it's always good to have a proper section. So what I plan to do is just go through these 12 very quickly. And feel free to stop me and reference any questions you might have. So I already referenced board member expectations. And then in that policy, I also started to reference Newly appointed trustees will participate in orientation and have the opportunity to receive mentoring. So I'm now bringing in the mentorship program into the policy so that we can institutionalize that process.
So do we know how that's going to be?
I will bring that to the May meeting.
That's the main thing.
Yes. But thank you for that, because I want to make sure that there were some things that I will be referencing as a point of thought for if we even want to do it, but I don't want to have to go back and revise the policy if we decide to do it or not. And I'll point that out on the, where I can. If you look at board organization, now I start to look at succession planning and develop and maintain an inventory of trustee assets. Just talked about that. I also start the reference the name change of the State Department to Ohio Behavioral Health. That is in the, that change is in the current sub-bill from the Ohio House. There, it's likely to be maintained. And so I've just started to include it and instructed my staff to include it in any additional changes. Now, if for some reason it gets pulled out, and I can think of one reason why it might, because it's gonna cost the department $7 million to change its name. It's the legislators' current conversation. Then that's an easy enough change, we could just go back. We don't need to come back to the board to change the name back to Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. We can just do a find and replace, and because it doesn't substantively change the policy. Also, as a reminder, board sets policy, I set procedure, but I've included the procedures in this conversation so that if you see something and you want to make recommendations or you have questions related to that, this is the time to do that. So I talked about board organization already. No changes to the board committee and subcommittee meetings. So essentially we're saying, oh no, sorry, missed that one. We want to look at that one real quick. If you look at the bottom of page 10, on the meeting protocol, I reference you'll see a reference to ORC section 121.221. That is the newly enacted law regarding virtual meetings. And I think I referenced that in more than one place on this committee, because there is a, in this one, because there is a different process for holding virtual, accounting for virtual attendance. Let's say it that way. You cannot just have a virtual meeting 100% virtual. I'm aware. But if we were to allow virtual attendance, there are requirements for that, which are substantial, and would require a separate policy. So I reference that just in case we ever want to consider that separate policy.
So the virtual meeting could be allowed only if they grant.
Correct, and you followed, well, I'm not even sure 100% virtual meeting. All of us are somewhere else is allowed.
Even if the state.
The state has passed a law of public meetings virtual law. I'm not sure that law allows for 100% virtual meetings. There are nuances that, under certain circumstances, members are allowed to participate virtually
That means they can vote, that's all that means, really.
and interact, but then there's a whole bunch of other items that would have to be done in order for us to meet the requirements of that law. And it is substantial. So at this point, I'm not even recommending that we go down that road. But I can do a better presentation on the virtual law meeting so that you can have a better understanding of what that might be.
Question I had is at the very top under policy, it says meetings in accordance with ORC, it says 121.22 point, it doesn't say the one after that.
Yeah,
I just wanted to make sure.
that's a very good catch. That needs to be changed because it also needs to reference the 121.221. I'll need to evaluate that to see if 22 covers it. 22 is the public meetings exclusions.
Okay,
And
okay, yeah,
121.221 is the public meetings virtual.
got it.
So I'll need to look at those to see
Yeah,
if
I
that
just thought it
covers
was
it
a
or not.
typo, so I was like,
No, it's
oh,
not,
wait.
if anything, it's an omission but I'll have to look at that. Because in the meeting protocol section,
Yeah.
except as otherwise defined ORC 121.221, members must be present and cast their vote. Present typically has been defined as physically present. Well, 221 allows you to be virtually present. So that's why I wanted to reference that. So we'll have to look at that section. Now, 22 probably references 221.
Maybe.
So I'll have to look at that.
Just to make sure,
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
No, it was a good catch because I did not look at it in that way. So that's board committees and subcommittee meetings. Then you have leadership as the reference in the leadership. It has been this board's practice to have the immediate past chair of the board on the executive nominating committee. So I just went ahead and added that into it. I believe the charter already references it. Another.
Clearly, this is part of, so you know what you're signing up for.
Then you have the board committees and subcommittees related to the structure of the board. What committees we have, and then what are the requirements for establishing committees. And that's the charter that we reference and approve every 2 years. No change was in that policy. And the election and duties of officers. Also, you can see I referenced the virtual meeting policy there to assure that the secretary understands that there's some responsibilities related to their duties. And then I also added or their designee under the treasurers, just to reflect and reference current practice. Okay, moving on. Modest change to director responsibilities, those are fairly defined within Ohio Revised Code, but I'll draw your attention to the last sentence there. That is a direct quote out of ORC, underlying authority and responsibilities. So I added it into the policy.
Where are you at, Scott?
The underlined is omitted and the new language is below on page 18. This is the
Not the
omitted.
underline, the struck through.
Pardon me?
You said underline, you meant struck through.
Yeah.
Is underlined.
Sorry, struck through, thank you. So that's the old language.
Good work.
because it's an edit. All the
Got it.
edits are underlined, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And then, hopefully won't have to go through the next process, the next two policies anytime soon, but they're the hiring of executive director or the interim,
No,
I don't know.
executive director. None of those have changed. Letters of endorsements have not changed. And planning review auditing has not changed, and then the promulgation of policies
Motion.
has not changed. There is a motion on middle of
Top of page 5.
top of page 5 for consideration. Now, I will say that, assuming approval of these 12 policies, it is our intent to name the 12 policies in the motion when it comes in front of the board next week. Mainly because we create a motion tracker. So any motion that you approve, goes on a separate list. And it's easy for us to go back and reference that list as opposed to digging through all the packets. And if we left that motion the way it is, then I'd have to still go back and see which ones were approved. So we're gonna go ahead and list them, so the motion will look differently, is all I'm trying to.
so you're saying that next week, mention each one of both ones.
Correct. In the motion, you'll see the Mental Health Recovery Services Board approves the board member expectations and responsibility, board member, board organization, policies. So that's the way it'll be.
Include the
read.
little cheat sheet too, because that was really helpful.
We always include, and you will always see when we're presenting policies, that table that shows the policy and the changes. It's just so much easier to organize and track that way. 'Cause remember, we have probably about 120 policies.
Yeah.
And a big portion of them will come in, the HR policies will come to you next month. And there's probably 20 of those. Now, most of those won't change because we've spent a lot of time
I was gonna say, we just updated those.
in 2020.
It's like it was just yesterday. That was gruesome.
And there was a lot of time
Lot of
spent
reading.
on those policies. So hopefully there won't be too many of those major edits, but I'm sure there'll be a few. So there's the motion for your consideration, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
So moved.
Scott,
Second.
so today we have 2 standing committees, correct?
Today, we have 2 standing committees, correct? Yes, Planning and Oversight and Executive and Nominating. That was actually decided in November of 17. And we've stuck with that structure since then.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Those abstaining? Motion carried. All right, thank you very much, Scott. We have our open session.
Okay, just briefly, there's plenty going on at One Government Center, but tomorrow, Housing Committee meets. They will once again look at the lead safe ordinance, been talked about for years. They will also look at the Peace in Motion Comprehensive Plan, whatever that is. It's the violence interrupters, and hopefully they're going to make some decisions what they're going to do in the future on that. Thursday, Plan Commission, very long agenda, 2 group homes, one on Mason, one on Franklin. I believe they will both be approved. And I know they are looking at that policy, which they were supposed to pass back in 2019 concerning group homes. I guess they'll bring it back again. Hopefully, City Council will approve it. As we speak, City Council is meeting. They are going to recognize April as a Second Chance Month, the national recognition. Just so you know, for every first Wednesday, they have Government Center. They have all those booths set up with all the agencies that serve people returning from incarceration. Hundreds of people show up for that. It was so popular, they now do it out at the Shared Services Building. The security guards at one Government Center, they had a nickname for it. They called it the Party. The day before, you would hear them say, "Are you ready for the party tomorrow?" They've got a new nickname. They now call it the Hugathon, because when everybody sees each other, they say, "Hey, when did you get out?" They give a big hug. So it's like a festival of hugging. So it's now called the Hugathon. And I see in today's Detroit news, I just want to update you. If you will recall, 3.5 years ago, you had the shooting at Oxford High in Oakland County, Michigan. The very disturbed young man shot 4 of his classmates fatally. In the first ever trial of its kind, his parents were convicted, and they are both doing 10 to 15. But because of the outrageous conduct of the prosecutor's office, the court proceedings are still going on, with both of them asking for new trials. The mother has been asking, and the father just declared today he's going to ask for a new trial. Among the many outrageous things that the prosecutor's office did, they immediately signed deals with the school saying, "You're free. We're not going to prosecute you for anything. We're only going to go after the parents." Even though there was a gag order, they signed agreements with the Washington Post newspaper and ABC News. They signed a deal with the Hulu streaming service, even though somebody in their office works for Hulu. And 3 days after the conviction, there was a documentary. Probably the most outrageous thing they did was they hired 2 public relations firms, paid them over 100,000 taxpayer dollars to dig up as much dirt as they could on this family. Not evidence, dirt. Because in this country, we have 2 courts. We have the court of law. We have the court of public opinion. For prosecutors, it's really tough. It's long and laborious to get a conviction in the court of law, but not in the court of public opinion. Yeah, you can get a conviction real easy. Call it swift justice, call it swift injustice. But because of all of this, here we are 3.5 years later. Court proceedings are still going on. Both of the parents, in separate motions, are asking for a new trial because of the conduct of the prosecutor. And so nobody has any closure, and we don't know how much longer this is going to go on. But if anything good can come of it, I hope that prosecutors across the country are watching this and asking them, "Hey, if I have a school shooting, near me, am I going to spend all my time and effort going after the parents and let the school completely off the hook?" Hopefully they wouldn't do that, because it's just wrong to only go after the parents and not the school. So that's my editorial opinion. Thank you.